Under the shadow of 1,000 glowing stars, a distant galaxy thrived, a sprawling empire governed by power, ambition, and an iron will. The Galactic Empire was a symbol of dominion, ruling countless planets with a grip so tight that even whispers of rebellion were snuffed out before they could take form. Amidst this vast and imposing regime, there was a small, unassuming planet called Thalros, where time seemed to stand still. Its dusty plains and humble villages held little strategic importance, but its people cherished the simplicity of their lives. In one such village, nestled near a ridge overlooking a quiet valley, lived an old man named Elrin. To outsiders, Elrin was merely a farmer, weathered by years of toil under the twin suns of Thalros. His hands bore the calluses of countless harvests, and his face carried lines that spoke of laughter and hardship alike. But beneath his quiet demeanor lay secrets buried deep, secrets that, if unearthed, could ignite chaos across the stars. Elrin lived alone in a modest home, his only companions the echoes of the past and the vast expanse of the night sky. Few knew of his son, Raylan, a name that had faded from the whispers of the village years ago. Those who did remember spoke of a bright, ambitious boy who had left Thalros as a young man, seeking a future among the stars. Little did they know that Raylan had risen to become one of the most formidable generals in the galaxy, a name that struck fear into the hearts of those who dared oppose him. The Galactic Empire, for all its might, had become paranoid in its pursuit of complete control. Their spies spoke of whispers, rumors of dissent and rebellion brewing in the most unexpected places. Thalros, insignificant as it seemed, had somehow drawn their attention. And so, one fateful evening, under the guise of darkness, Imperial ships descended upon the quiet village. The soldiers marched with precision, their boots crunching against the dry soil as they closed in on Elrin's humble home. The old man, hearing the commotion, stepped out onto his porch, his frail frame silhouetted against the glow of the invaders' lights. He stood tall, his gaze steady despite the overwhelming force that had come for him. "You harbor secrets of the rebellion," the lead officer accused, his voice cold and unyielding. "Tell us what you know, or face the consequences." Elrin, unflinching, met the officer's gaze. "I am but a farmer," he said calmly, his voice carrying a quiet strength. "Your empire has no place here." But the empire knew no mercy. They saw defiance as a spark that could kindle flames of rebellion. And so, without hesitation, they struck Elrin down, his body crumpling to the ground like the fall of a lone tree in an empty forest. The soldiers left as quickly as they had arrived, their mission complete, unaware of the storm they had just unleashed. Far away, aboard a massive warship drifting through the endless expanse of space, General Raylan received a transmission. His sharp, battle-hardened features remained stoic as he listened to the report. But when the name Thalros reached his ears, a flicker of something, pain, anger, perhaps regret, passed over his face. "Send me the details," he ordered curtly, his voice tight. As the screen dimmed, Raylan stood in silence, the weight of the revelation pressing down on him. The Galactic Empire, the very institution he had served with unyielding loyalty, had killed his father. They had taken from him the last tether to the simple life he had left behind. But the Empire had made a fatal mistake. They had underestimated the lengths to which a man like Raylan would go for vengeance. For beneath the disciplined exterior of a soldier lay a son, and in his heart now burned a singular, unrelenting purpose: justice. The ship's engines roared to life, cutting through the void as Raylan set a course for Thalros. The stars outside the viewport blurred into streaks of light, but his mind was razor-sharp, already calculating his next move. He knew the Empire well, its strengths, its weaknesses, and its arrogance. He would use all of it against them. As the warship hurtled through space, Raylan clenched his fists, a quiet vow forming in his mind. The Empire would pay for what they had done, and he would ensure they never forgot the wrath of the son they had underestimated. As Raylan's warship streaked through hyperspace, his mind churned with memories he thought he'd buried long ago. Thalros wasn't just a planet to him, it was the place that shaped the boy he once was, a version of himself he had spent years trying to forget. The scent of the wildflowers in the valley, the sound of the wind whistling through the trees, and his father's steady voice teaching him the ways of the land, they all came flooding back now, sharper than ever. But the memory of leaving was just as vivid. He had been restless back then, yearning for something more than the simple life of a farmer's son. He hadn't realized the cost of his ambition, how much his father's quiet support had meant. Elrin had stood on the same porch where he later met his end, watching his son disappear into the horizon, his face a mask of pride and pain. Rylan hadn't looked back, not until now. The ship's comm system buzzed, pulling Rylan from his thoughts. His second-in-command, Lieutenant Vara, appeared on the screen, her expression as sharp and professional as ever. Vara had served alongside him for years, earning his trust through countless battles, but even she didn't know much about his past. "General, we've gathered the intelligence on the incident at Tharos," she said, her tone clipped. It appears to have been a routine operation. No known ties to rebellion were uncovered. The local target was neutralized based on suspicion alone. Neutralized, Rylan repeated bitterly, the word catching in his throat. He closed his eyes for a moment, willing his anger to stay beneath the surface. "I want every detail of the operation. Names, ranks, the officers involved, everything." Vara hesitated. "With all due respect, sir, the Empire may not appreciate this level of scrutiny on a minor incident. We've already been assigned to lead the next campaign on Zitham Prime." Delaying culled. "This is not a request, Lieutenant," Rylan interrupted, his voice low but commanding. "Do it, and reroute us to Tharos immediately." Vara nodded, though her unease was evident. "Understood, General." As the transmission ended, Rylan leaned back in his chair, staring out at the swirling light of hyperspace. He knew Vara was loyal, but even loyalty had its limits in the Empire. Questioning orders, digging into operations, and showing any sign of personal involvement were all risks he couldn't afford. Yet he couldn't stop himself. His father had been taken from him, and the Empire would answer for it. The ship emerged from hyperspace above Tharos, the planet's golden surface gleaming under its twin suns. It looked so small, so unassuming from up here, a sharp contrast to the storm raging in Rylan's mind. He donned his uniform, the weight of the insignia on his chest heavier than ever, and prepared to descend. The village was eerily quiet when he arrived. The familiar ridge he'd climbed as a boy now felt like the edge of a battlefield. The air smelled of smoke, though no fires burned. The soldiers had left behind scars that would take more than time to heal. Rylan walked through the streets, his boots kicking up dust, his eyes scanning the faces of the villagers who dared to look at him. They recognized the uniform, and with it, they saw the enemy. But there was something else in their gazes too, a flicker of recognition, buried beneath layers of fear and resentment. Rylan ignored the stares, his focus narrowing as he approached the small house on the ridge. It was just as he remembered, yet so profoundly changed. The porch where his father once stood was broken, the wooden beams splintered. The door hung loosely on its hinges, swaying in the breeze. Inside, the home was a mess, furniture overturned, belongings scattered. The Empire had left nothing untouched in their search for answers. Rylan knelt by the table, running his fingers over its surface. He remembered sitting there as a boy, listening to his father's stories of the stars. Elrin had always been fascinated by the galaxy beyond their little world, yet he'd never left Tharos. Rylan had inherited that same fascination, but unlike his father, he turned it into a weapon. A sudden noise outside jolted him from his thoughts. He rose quickly, his hand instinctively reaching for the blaster at his side. The sound grew louder. A shuffle of footsteps, hesitant and uneven. He stepped onto the porch and found himself face to face with a young girl, no older than 10. She froze when she saw him, her wide eyes darting to the insignia on his uniform. Rylan raised a hand slowly, trying to appear as unthreatening as possible. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said softly. "What's your name?" The girl hesitated before answering. "Lyra." "Lyra," he repeated, nodding. "Were you here when the soldiers came?" Her gaze dropped to the ground, and she nodded. They took him. Your father. He didn't fight them. He just stood there." Her voice trembled as she spoke, and tears welled in her eyes. "They said he was hiding something, but he wasn't. He wasn't." Rylan's chest tightened. He crouched down to her level, his voice gentle. "Lyra, did he say anything to you? Before they came?" She sniffled, wiping her face with her sleeve. "He told me to hide. He said to be brave." She looked up at him, her expression a mix of confusion and anger. Why did they do it? He didn't do anything wrong. Rylan didn't have an answer. How could he explain the cold, calculated cruelty of the Empire to a child? How could he justify the very system he had upheld for so long? Because they were afraid, he said finally, his voice barely above a whisper. They were afraid of what he represented, someone they couldn't control. Lyra stared at him for a moment, as if trying to understand his words. Then, without another word, she turned and ran back down the hill, disappearing into the village. Rylan stood there, the weight of her question lingering in the air. Why had they done it? The answer wasn't just about his father. It was about the Empire itself, its endless hunger for power, its fear of anything that threatened its authority. And now Rylan realized he wasn't just a part of that machine. He was its most dangerous weapon. But weapons could be turned. As the twin suns dipped below the horizon, casting the valley in shades of orange and gold, Rylan made a silent vow. The Empire thought it could act without consequence, that it could destroy lives and erase the evidence. But they had miscalculated. They had made this personal. And Rylan was about to show them just how dangerous a mistake that could be. As darkness blanketed Thalros, the once familiar landscape seemed foreign to Rylan. The quiet was unsettling, broken only by the occasional rustle of the wind through the fields. Standing on the ridge, he looked out over the village, his mind churning with questions that had no easy answers. He had spent years perfecting the art of war, mastering tactics and outmaneuvering enemies. But this was different. This wasn't a battlefield, it was home, and the lines between right and wrong were no longer clear. The faint hum of his communicator pulled him back to the present. He hesitated before answering, knowing it would be Lieutenant Vara, likely with an update on the investigation. When her face appeared on the small screen, her expression was tense. "General, I've uncovered something you need to see," Vara said without preamble. "It's about the mission logs from the Thalros operation. They've been altered." Rylan's jaw tightened. "Explain." "The official report claims your father was linked to rebel activity," she continued, her tone cautious. "But the evidence doesn't add up. There's no record of him contacting any known dissident groups, no suspicious transactions, nothing. It looks like someone wanted him eliminated, and they fabricated a reason to justify it." Rylan's grip on the communicator tightened. "Who authorized the operation?" Vara hesitated. The order came directly from High Command. But the officer in charge on the ground was Commander Harlan. He's stationed on the Argon base now. Harlan, the name was familiar. Rylan had crossed paths with him before, a loyalist to the core, ambitious and ruthless. If anyone would carry out a questionable order without hesitation, it was him. Rylan's mind raced as he weighed his options. Confronting Harlan directly would be risky, especially without concrete proof. But staying silent wasn't an option either. "Send me everything you have," Rylan said. "I'll handle it from here." Vara nodded, though the concern on her face lingered. "Be careful, General. If High Command is involved, this could be bigger than we realize." As the transmission ended, Rylan felt the weight of her words settle on him. High Command. The very heart of the Empire. If they had orchestrated this, it wasn't just about his father, it was about something far more dangerous. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was missing a crucial piece of the puzzle. The next morning, Rylan made his way to the Argon base under the pretense of an inspection. The sprawling station, orbiting a desolate moon, was a hub of activity, with troops preparing for upcoming campaigns and officers reviewing strategic plans. Harlan's quarters were located in the upper levels, a reminder of his elevated status within the Empire's hierarchy. When Rylan entered the room, Harlan rose to greet him, his expression a mix of surprise and wariness. The man was as he remembered, tall, sharp-eyed, with an air of arrogance that came from years of unquestioned authority. "General Rylan," Harlan said, forcing a smile. "To what do I owe the honor?" Rylan didn't waste time on pleasantries. "I'm here about the Thalros operation." Harlan's smile faltered, replaced by a carefully neutral expression. Yes. A minor matter, really. Routine protocol." Rylan stepped closer, his tone icy. "Routine protocol doesn't involve fabricating evidence against an innocent man. Why was my father targeted?" For a moment, Harlan's mask slipped, revealing a flicker of unease. But he recovered quickly, his voice steady. "I was following orders, General. The directive came from High Command. I wasn't privy to their reasoning." "You didn't question it?" Ryland demanded, his voice rising. "You didn't think twice about killing a man who posed no threat?" Harlan met his gaze, his demeanor turning defensive. "That's not how the Empire works, Ryland. We follow orders. You of all people should understand that." Ryland stared at him, his anger simmering beneath the surface. He knew Harlan wasn't the mastermind behind this, but he was complicit, and that was enough. Still, pressing him further here would only draw unwanted attention. He needed to be strategic. "This isn't over," Ryland said, his voice low and dangerous. "I'll find the truth." As he left Harlan's quarters, his mind raced. High Command's involvement confirmed his worst fears. This wasn't just about silencing his father, it was about sending a message. But to whom? And why? Back aboard his warship, Ryland pored over the data Vara had sent. The deeper he delved, the clearer it became that his father's death was part of a larger pattern. Similar incidents had occurred on other fringe planets, individuals with no apparent ties to the rebellion being targeted and eliminated. Each case was marked by the same vague justifications and lack of concrete evidence. It was as if the Empire was trying to erase something, or someone, before they could pose a threat. But what could an old farmer on Pharos have possibly known that was worth such drastic measures? The answer, Ryland realized, lay not in his father's past but in his own. His rise through the ranks of the Empire had been meteoric, driven by his unparalleled strategic mind and unflinching loyalty. But loyalty, he now understood, was a fragile thing. And if the Empire saw even the faintest shadow of doubt in him, they would act to ensure his silence. His father's death wasn't just a message to the galaxy, it was a warning to him. As the realization sank in, Ryland felt the weight of his uniform like a shackle. The insignia that had once symbolized his pride now felt like a brand, marking him as a pawn in a game he no longer wanted to play. He stood in the warship's command center, staring out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Empire's web of lies and manipulation was unraveling, and he was determined to pull the threads until the entire structure came crashing down. But he couldn't do it alone. He needed allies, people he could trust, though trust was a scarce commodity in the Empire. Ryland turned to Vara, who had just entered the room. Her expression was serious as always, but there was a flicker of something else in her eyes. Concern, perhaps even loyalty. "Lieutenant," he said, his voice steady, "how far are you willing to go to uncover the truth?" She tilted her head slightly, studying him. "That depends on what you're asking, General." "I'm asking if you're willing to stand against the Empire," he said, the weight of the words hanging between them. "Because if we go any further, there's no turning back." Vara hesitated, but only for a moment. Then she straightened her shoulders and met his gaze. "I swore an oath to serve the Empire, but I also swore to protect what's right. If the Empire has betrayed that, then my loyalty lies elsewhere." Ryland nodded, a small glimmer of hope piercing the darkness. He wasn't alone in this fight. Together, they would expose the truth, no matter how deep the corruption ran. The Empire thought it could destroy him by taking his father, but they had only ignited a fire that would burn brighter than they could imagine. The warship cruised silently through the darkness of space, its engines humming softly against the backdrop of the void. Inside, Ryland paced the length of the command center, his thoughts a whirlwind of plans and possibilities. Every piece of information they had uncovered pointed to a conspiracy far larger than he'd anticipated. High Command wasn't just eliminating individuals, they were rewriting history, erasing truths that could threaten their absolute grip on the galaxy. Vara stood nearby, her gaze fixed on the data scrolling across the screen. She had spent hours analyzing the patterns, cross-referencing incidents across multiple systems. The more they uncovered, the clearer it became. This wasn't random. It was orchestrated, calculated, and devastatingly effective. "General," Vara said, breaking the silence, "I found something. A name keeps appearing in the classified files tied to these operations. Project Dominion. Whatever it is, it's connected to all of this." Ryland stopped pacing, his attention snapping to her. "Project Dominion? What else do we know?" "Not much," she admitted, her voice tinged with frustration. The files are heavily encrypted, but I traced the origin of the directives. They're coming from an outpost deep in the Outer Rim. It's a black site off the official records. If there are answers, they'll be there. Ryland's jaw tightened. A black site meant danger. It meant secrecy and layers of protection designed to keep even the most determined intruders out. But it also meant they were close. If High Command had gone to such lengths to hide this, it was because the truth was too dangerous to reveal. We set a course, Ryland said, his tone firm. If this outpost holds the key, then we'll find it, no matter what. The journey to the Outer Rim was tense, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on everyone aboard. The crew, loyal to Ryland but unaware of the full scope of his mission, operated with their usual efficiency. Yet even they could sense the shift in their leader's demeanor. He was more focused, more driven, as if the stakes had become personal, which of course they had. When they arrived at the coordinates, the outpost loomed before them, a dark and imposing structure nestled within the shadow of a massive asteroid. Its design was utilitarian, with no visible insignia or markings to identify it. The lack of activity suggested secrecy, but Ryland knew better. The silence was a trap, meant to lull potential intruders into a false sense of security. Scanners are picking up defensive systems, Vara reported. Automated turrets, shield arrays, and a fleet of drones stationed nearby. This isn't going to be easy. Ryland nodded, his mind already calculating. We'll go in stealth, a small team. If we try to engage head-on, we'll lose. Vara didn't argue. She knew better than to question Ryland's instincts. Within the hour, they had assembled a strike team, hand-picked soldiers who had proven their loyalty time and time again. Ryland briefed them quickly, omitting the more sensitive details of the mission. All they needed to know was that they were uncovering a threat to the Empire's stability. As they approached the outpost in a cloaked shuttle, the tension in the air was palpable. Ryland's pulse quickened, but his mind remained sharp. The shuttle maneuvered through the asteroid field, avoiding the patrol routes of the drones. Finally, they landed on a hidden docking bay, the faint hiss of the shuttle's doors opening echoing in the stillness. The interior of the outpost was cold and sterile, its corridors dimly lit by flickering lights. The team moved in formation, their weapons at the ready, every step measured and silent. Ryland led the way, his senses heightened. He couldn't afford any mistakes, not now. They encountered their first resistance near the central hub. A squad of guards patrolled the area, their armor sleek and advanced. Ryland signaled his team, and they moved with precision, taking the guards down swiftly and silently. The mission was too delicate for open conflict. They couldn't risk alerting the entire outpost. At the heart of the facility, they found the data core, a massive terminal surrounded by conduits that pulsed with energy. Vara immediately got to work, her fingers flying across the console as she bypassed layers of encryption. The seconds stretched into minutes, each one feeling like an eternity. "I'm in," she said finally, her voice low but triumphant. "But this is bigger than I thought. Project Dominion isn't just about erasing people, it's about control. High Command is developing a system to monitor and manipulate entire planets. Surveillance, propaganda, even biological experiments, it's all here." Ryland's stomach churned as he absorbed her words. This wasn't just a conspiracy, it was a plan to reshape the galaxy, to strip away freedom and individuality on a scale he hadn't thought possible. And his father must have known something about it. Enough to make him a target. Before he could respond, an alarm blared, its shrill cry echoing through the facility. Vara's head snapped up. "They've detected us. We need to move now." The team fell into formation as the sound of boots echoed down the corridor. The enemy was closing in, their numbers overwhelming. Ryland's mind raced as he calculated their odds. They were outgunned and outnumbered, but retreating wasn't an option, not when they were so close to the truth. "We hold the line," Ryland said, his voice calm but commanding. "Vara, download everything you can. The rest of you, prepare for engagement." The first wave of attackers stormed into the room, their weapons blazing. The air was filled with the deafening roar of blaster fire, the acrid smell of energy burns thick in the air. Ryland fought with a precision born of years on the battlefield, his movements fluid and deliberate. But for every enemy they took down, more seemed to take their place. "We're running out of time," Vora shouted, her voice barely audible over the chaos.